welcome to the Month End CPG Community Chat. The Month End will provide emerging CPG brands real-life knowledge into the accounting, finance, and operational worlds. Our guests will be key stakeholders from those same brands as well as other key contributors to the industry. Welcome to episode 36 of the Month End Podcast. Today we have Tyler Watson from Ebenhoeh Seasoning. How you doing today, Tyler?
I'm doing fantastic. How about you, Brad?
Fantastic. Love it. Love the start to this conversation. I'm doing great, man. Tyler's the SVP of sales at Ebenhoeh and has been there since 2018. And I'm looking forward to this chat on the aspect from a sales side, but how it integrates on the operations finance side of a CPG brand. So before we get started, why don't we start with kind of your personal background, Tyler, as well as then let's integrate it with what Ebenhoeh does and what you do at Ebenhoeh. So just the floor is yours.
Thanks, man. So I always like to kind of start this introduction for myself because that's my favorite topic is me. But no, man, eighth grade education. I don't have a high school diploma, no college experience whatsoever. I was basically born on a retail sales floor, loved people, sold shoes, was my kind of first go at sales. Couldn't make it as a sandwich artist at Panera Bread. So my wife, who then was my shift lead, had no idea she was going to become my wife. She said, listen, man, this isn't working out. You need to go apply for this shoe store in the mall over here. And I'm like, okay, cool. So anyway, learn shoe sales. And it wasn't just your bring a box out and set it in front of the customer. It was like, hey, you're going to sit and fit this customer. You're going to try to sell them, arch support. You're going to talk to them about their ailments and all these things. So, that's where I really learned that I love people. As a kid, I spent a lot of time getting booted out of schools and spent some time behind bars and things like that and learned that I didn't want to be there for long. And so I started to understand that my diverse kind of exposure at a young age was really applicable to being able to learn all walks of life and how I can, converse and help those people through product satisfaction. Love being able to hand somebody a tangible product and tell them about it, educate them about it, get them excited about it, and then bring them along on the journey, right? Because that's what we do. We build brands. That's me in a nutshell. Retail, dyed-in-the-wool sales guy. How I started with Ebenhoeh, basically Dan himself was a bartender. And so my neighbor actually worked at the bar with him. And this was years ago, back in 2017. And my neighbor's cooking with this, we're grilling out in the neighborhood. And my neighbor's whips out this baggie of seasoning. And I'm like, whoa, wait a minute, dude, that looks like weed, dude. What are you about to put on my chicken? And I'm like, and he's like, it's Ebenhoeh, man. I'm like, I don't know what Ebenhoeh is. And so anyway, I loved it, enjoyed it, tried it. Kids loved it, wife loved it. And I'm like, where do I find this stuff? And lo and behold, he calls Dan that night. And Dan's like, hey, if y'all, I know you've already eaten, but like I'm cooking up some fish, like bring Tyler over. If he just wants the original, like I want to tell him why he should try my spicy. And I want him to try spicy on this salmon I'm cooking. And I'd never met the dude before, but went over to his house and quickly learned. And when I talk about Dan, the first thing I talk about is his love language, and that is cooking for people. He's just so passionate about, getting his flavor on somebody's taste bud and then watching their reaction. And so that's kind of like my introduction to Ebenhoeh was literally this dude cooking for me in his kitchen. And I loved it so much that I just wanted to be a part of the brand and made that happen just a few months later.
Awesome. That's a great background on everything here. Quick question. Have you only been like in sales from an employee relationship? Have you had your own business? Have you tried any side hustles or anything like that?
Yeah, I sold some insurance. That wasn't for me. Great question. I've done franchise sales, so sold and supported retail franchise stores for UPS. But yeah, no, really never went into business for myself. I mean, other than, dabbling in pharmaceuticals at an early age.
I can see
I
why
told you, man, you're going to have to edit me.
I can see why you're a sales guy and not just a traditional accountant here. I love it. So anyways, this is great. So when you went to Ebenhoeh and you started there, were you like, what was your role then? And then how have you kind of changed that, 5 years later in terms of almost us heading into 2024 here?
Yeah, it's funny, man. I took a demotion the last time I came back to Dano's. When I first started with Dan back when I was telling you, he was kind of a one-man band. And so when he brought me on as president and president of sales and business development. So you introduced me as SVP. I have taken a demotion since those days, but totally fine. So yeah, so when I came back to Dano's, there was an interim, right? So like it wasn't sustainable when we were just doing state fairs, flea markets, things like that. I had two kids at the time, a mortgage, and that wasn't vibing. So I took the job with UPS to kind of sustain for 2.5, 3 years, and then Dano's came back around to me and said, "Man, we're really trying to build this thing. We've got a new marketing team here that's an agency that was helping build something special, and they were selling a lot on Amazon. Dan was like recently taken off on TikTok and social media and stuff. So I was like, okay, cool. So I came back as regional vice president of sales. So I had kind of the majority of the country, not the East Coast, but the rest of it, and started to develop accounts out from there. And then quickly just absorbed the other salesperson's job at the time, basically, and became the vice president of sales within probably 3 to 4 months of being back on Dano's staff. And have been that pretty much since. And then recently they're like, listen, we kind of created more of like a board, if you will, internal board of folks who are really, high level decision makers driving strategy for the company. And they invited me into that and gave me the senior vice president role. So I was very appreciative of that.
That's awesome. From an aspect of kind of what you learned selling an actual, consumer packaged good within this kind of food and drink CPG space, what didn't you know when you came in, and now what do you know, or that helps you sell the product? Clearly, there's a lot of intangible sales things that are just general across everything, but specific within this industry. What have you learned, and what has really helped you guys excel and had a ton of growth the last couple of years?
Yeah, I knew absolutely nothing coming into this industry, man. Like I said, I was from a whole different world of sales. And so when you come into the grocery and you're selling to mass and the likes of Walmart and, Kroger, Albertsons, Publix, all the awesome folks I've had the opportunity to work with over the last 2.5 years building this brand with the company. I ask a lot of questions, man. I mean, if I don't know what an abbreviation or acronym or whatever it is, I'm not going to sit there and look it up on Google. I'm just going to ask the person point blank, what's that mean? Like, I don't know. We're all new. None of us are from CPG. We're trying to build this thing together. And I think that's really lent to a lot of the great relationship building I've been able to have with our buyers and key decision makers is like, they've helped me grow into this role, 100%. I couldn't have done it without our retail partners kind of helping me along the way and understanding some of these things. So, I think buying data has been really helpful. So, getting to know Nielsen IQ and those folks, buying spins data, getting to know some of those folks, working with their teams. Has taught me a lot about like retail metrics and key performance indicators that, are very important to our business. So yeah, I mean, I think it's really just been, learning trial by fire, and working with our retail partners and just being very transparent, just like what you see with Dan and our brand and the authenticity that lends to, his recipe content and things like that on social media. I try to really bring that same element of authenticity to the sales process and the selling process with our buyers, and just let them know that they're helping us build this brand. They're innovating with us, and they're not on the sidelines watching.
So, rewinding back to buying data, it's a great kind of jumping off point here. So a lot of data exists out there. So like, what was kind of the exact data you bought in relation to what you're looking at? And then what are kind of the top 2 or 3 metrics or KPIs that you kind of focus on, maybe at the store level or whatever it is?
Yeah. So first set of data, we looked at buying. We were only in like 300 stores, but I knew we were killing it in those stores. I just didn't know how much and how well we were doing. And so I started a conversation off with he's a dear friend of mine, man. I don't typically meet a stranger, but Chris Hanley's his name, and he was a Nielsen sales guy for emerging brands with their platform called Visor. And so we bought Visor data, and what was so compelling, for me as a salesperson to see is they have this metric called brand ranking, and it's not a sales ranking metric. It's more of like it takes into account like your distribution metrics. It takes into account velocity, average selling price, just all the cool metrics that make up a brand and their success or non in retail. That brand ranking takes into account for. And so when he was demoing the product for us, he's like, I've never actually met with a brand that was number one on the brand ranking report. And he's like, you guys are in 300 stores and you guys are number one on this. You're basically the fastest growing brand in the category. So I knew that we had a really compelling selling story to tell. And so I was like, dude, you got to walk me through what all these things mean. I don't know what velocity is. I don't know what a total distribution point is. This was 2.5 years ago. We were in, we had some early adopter stores that brought our product in and we were very green. So Visor was a huge help. And now we, spend quite a bit of money to obtain that data from all aggregated data from all sorts of sources and make sense of it.
Very cool. Very cool. So what has been your biggest kind of challenge or frustration with kind of distribution, with working with retail aspect from your position?
I'd say it's a tough question. I mean, I think, sometimes we face certain partners have supply chain constraints, and it causes for our shelf price to be a lot more than what we believe it should be. And it's no fault of our own, right? Like if that retail partner doesn't have distribution in a certain area or region of the country, then we have to go through a third party distributor in order to get it to those shelves. And, that person might have a, 28 to 35% markup or whatever it is. And then the retailer's got to make their markup. And then all of a sudden our bottle that should be, $7-8 on shelf is $10. And that, really does kill our velocities. And so I think that's a huge obstacle for us that we're still, actively trying to overcome and figure out. And other than that, man, I can't think of anything offhand. I mean, this is it's a tough, scrappy business to be in, but that would probably be my biggest tiff right now is just getting our price right.
So
the spice is right, the price is not.
When you go to sell the product, what do you say? Hey, we're fantastic, dominant, and disruptive. Is that right?
Fantastic. Dano might be the best Dan seasoning you ever had because it's damn good.
Oh, I love it. So then,
and since we're talking about Danalytics,
yes, there we go. So since we're talking about the D's, deduction management, kind of trace management, let's get into that. How do you manage that? How does Danos handle that and ensuring you're kind of set up for success, but also kind of review auditing, kind of ensuring you're what you're getting charged and kickback is what you guys have agreed upon?
Yeah, man, that was new to us, right? I mean, that's something you go into business with somebody and you're like, oh man, this is great. We just got on shelf, and then you get a $90,000 invoice back, right? And you're like, what the hell is this for? So yeah, no, we have a rock star financial team here. We've got a retail ops coordinator on my team who is just awesome at kind of being one of those people who spots that from a mile away and says something doesn't look right here, or what is this? What code is this? What is that applying to? And oftentimes the first question is, Tyler, what the hell did you do, during negotiations? But no, man, I think that's one thing that we don't have a fluid process for it quite as of yet, because I think what the constraints are there is that retail partners just have so many different platforms to log into and try to manage that. And so, we've seen an evolution in that particular area of like AI coming in and chatbots being able to bring in all of those platforms and integrate all those platforms. Is probably something you're way more familiar with than I am, of being able to make sense of those things, track those things, audit, create self audits for you guys to do monthly and things like that. So I don't get too far into the weeds. I just kind of, if they ask me a question, our finance team says, hey, what is this about, this bill back or whatever it is. I can usually kind of give a good idea of what I know. But yeah, I wish I could tell you a little bit more about that. But that's probably about the gist of my expertise on that.
Yeah, it's definitely a very kind of nuanced situation, a specific kind of circumstance you have to deal with in the CPG space. But on the sales side, so clearly, just from our conversation, I'm assuming you could probably sell anything on the side of the road, and you want to sell a lot of things, right? So how do you handle the sales planning, the sales? Hey, I want to sell here and I want to go to infinity. But how does that then reconcile to two things? Let's start first on the inventory side, from your supply chain, your inventory, the purchasing team, the co-man or the manufacturing, whatever your process is. How do you guys handle that process?
Yeah, Awesome. So we brought on a demand planner because it all was living in my head before that on what I had in the pipeline. And we brought in, I've got a business development guy on my team who brought HubSpot to the table, who could help kind of create a pipeline there, right? And so we kind of created some processes and and so forth. But yeah, I mean, inventory management was huge for us because, when you start to ramp up for a 4,000 store rollout, right, or a 3,000 or whatever it is, and you're trying to start to take into account not just the opening order, but what are going to be the anticipated velocities in that channel. Why are we, why are we going after them? What products are going to be in there? Now that we don't have just 2 SKUs anymore, it's a lot to manage. And as a sales guy, it's easy for me to say, oh, I'm just supposed to sell, right? But then if you don't have a team to be able to support that, or an infrastructure to be able to support that, and more importantly, if they don't understand what's going on, if they don't understand what you were doing and what you were selling, it's not going to work. So yeah, I think as a new emerging brand, it's very new to us, that whole process of organizing and making sense of an opening order versus a replenishment order. And so we've been very in tune with each other from department to department to kind of bridge the gap on that process so far. So I'm not saying we've perfected it by any means, but we're not out of stock anywhere. Our on time and full percentages are solid. We report, to each other. I think one thing that, between our sales and operations department we've created is kind of these KPIs that we live and die by, that sales actually reports to operations, and then operations reports back as though they're our customer, or that we're their customer. And I think that mindset has really created a good cohesion between the 2 departments.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. You're in the business together and the team together, so ensuring there's some accountability between each other helps out. And then, how do you handle reconcile that to kind of the finance, the cash, the accounting team of paying for your paying for your inventory and supply chain and raw materials, as well as then getting paid from your retailers? Like, what does your integration with that look like?
Yeah, same. It's a very similar process, man. I mean, we got a pretty small crew. I mean, we're not. I say that relevant to the size of business. We're probably in the year between 35 and 40 million. We got about 30 employees, maybe a little bit more than that. But our accounting team is 3 guys, 3 cats, and then sales is 3 or 4 people. So tight, man. Just we keep it tight, run it lean. Make sure we're talking to each other all the time. But I think we try to make sure there are meetings in place that, we kind of go over high level, where's the business at? Where did we end last quarter? How are we, reconciling these things? But, we got an ERP system recently. Bright Pearl is what we've been using. So we're starting to try to bring in a lot of, integration and connectivity with different things that we're using, different platforms we're using, and trying to bring it all into that one kind of umbrella system for everybody to kind of, live in and report to.
Yep. All of that makes sense. In relation to kind of the various sales channels you sell in, and how do you 2 things, like understand the success of the specific sales channels, distribution, direct to consumer, Amazon, whatever, as well as have you guys decided which sales channels to kind of go into and to spend your kind of time and energy on?
Yeah, I wish I had an awesome strategized answer for you. I mean, truly, we've gone after every single account we could. So, hardware. I went after Lowe's Hardware, became the #1 selling brand in their stores. Going into Buc-ee's, the travel destination stop. I don't know if you are familiar with those, little Beaver guy, but we went into Buc-ee's and became their #1 selling brand, and we're not even Texas born brand. And that was a huge accomplishment for us. So, I mean, going after everything. And I think right now we're to a point now to where we really do need and intend to spend a lot of time on channel strategy and differentiation between the channels. Club being one that I feel like we, may not have approached properly to begin with, but, how do we go back to the drawing board and kind of look at the big, competitors inside a club and what we did with them, what didn't work, what did work, was the pack size right? Was the price per ounce right? All those different things that, an early, company probably kind of screws up. And it's like, when I talk to other brands who have been down this path before, it's like, yeah, we did that too. And it makes me feel a lot better, man, because, it's one of those things you really are hard on yourselves internally when things don't work out exactly like you want them to. But yeah, I mean, I think we've learned a lot from those exploratory kind of first 2 years in business in retail. So Yeah, I think now what we're looking at is what makes the most sense based off of the consumer research that we have. What do we know about our shopper? Now we can kind of get a little bit more tactical on what type of flavors we want to put into certain channels. Are there offshoot product lines that we want to toy around with? What channel is good for that? Is there, need for differentiation inside of a channel to create less competition and less price, competition within that channel? Those are the types of questions we're really starting to ask ourselves now that we've gotten a good foothold in retail.
Oh, that makes sense. And the last question before we get to our final questions on the podcast, what are some best practices or really good kind of ways that Dano and you and the sales, and I'm sure the marketing folks have created brand awareness? What are some kind of cool tools or things you guys have done, the last kind of, maybe in 2023 to do that?
Yeah, I think probably one of my favorite things we've done, as of late is we created this campaign together on our social media called #InTheWild. So we were looking at a page. We have this group on Facebook. It's called Dano's Fanos. And we built this page. It was I think we had 200 members when I joined back in 2018, maybe less than that actually. And now we've got over 200 and almost 240,000 members right now. And so it's grown exponentially. And we look at that channel, and I was looking at the channel, and I'm like, noticing that a lot of people get really excited about finding our product in a retail store near them. And I'm like, what can we do with that? Because we've always been really worried about kind of poking the algorithm on our social channels and feeling too salesy, in our content. And so I started thinking, where could that type of content live? And so we kind of put our heads together and realized quickly that we weren't utilizing stories. And so at the top of, Facebook, Instagram, stories, it's just a snapshot in time, 24 hours, and it goes away. I'm like, man, what if we started putting that customer's engagement, that picture of them finding it at retail, holding up a bottle in front of the store with the logo in the background, that sort of thing? What if we put that on stories and got people excited about sharing that, and then sharing it to our Facebook page or Instagram, who's, we got millions of followers. So it's exciting if you see some huge brand, on social, post your content. And so we started this In the Wild campaign, and it was gaining, 10, 20, 30,000 impressions a day. Just doing that alone and showing customers in the wild finding our product. And so we were, looking at, basically a couple million impressions more every single month. And those impressions were important because they were showing retail availability, right? We had never really figured out a good campaign to do that without coming across like we were trying to sell, where our recipe videos are where we kind of started and have a good foothold on social media. So this was a great way for us to kind of dip our toe in the water on that and utilize a particular tool on social media that we'd not used before, which was, and not that we didn't use the stories, it was just that we didn't have a real strategy to using the stories. And now I feel like we can do that with this In the Wild campaign, and it can be kind of an evergreen campaign that runs forever, and people can continue sharing their excitement about finding Dano's in the wild.
Yeah, I love stories like that, or just love kind of learning like that as a kind of a fellow, entrepreneur myself and a businessman, and just kind of always kind of conscious and aware of marketing, brand strategy, awareness, all that type of stuff, especially in terms of how social media and society kind of keeps changing and how they absorb content, right? So it's right. Always interesting to see where that exists. So as we're wrapping this up, this has been an awesome conversation. For all the CPG kind of founders out there, we always end with two questions. And then the first one, I want to kind of say, what does one do from your perspective?
Yeah, so I had to really mull this over. You and I talked about this before, and I was like, and by the way, I feel like I hadn't gotten to know you. We got to do a second episode at some point in time. I got to interview you because you seem like an awesome guy.
I'm in. We're in.
But yeah, so do form a brand strategy, and really to ensure that your messaging is clear, it's relevant. I believe that recently we did a lot more consumer, dove into a lot more consumer research, and it led us to find that a very different consumer was shopping and engaging with our brand on e-com than the one buying at retail. And you would think that, the e-com customer was actually younger, but it was the opposite. It was the customer that was buying on e-commerce was actually older, and the customer buying in store was younger. So that was a really interesting, kind of factoid to learn about that. And then, pivoting the marketing plan to accommodate that where the bulk of your business is when your strategy was so, tailored to that e-com customer, that's just not an easy task. So yeah, brand strategy, man, form one. No, even though we knew we had a gut feeling of who we were and who our customer was, getting that data to support a gut-based decision really helped, craft our strategy.
Awesome. And then what is one don't?
Yeah, I mean, this is for me as a sales guy, this was tough because like all sales guys just kind of want to let their customer dictate things. But I feel like because our success is due to our disruption, like you said earlier, we dominate and disrupt is kind of like our mantra here as a leadership team. And so I've had partner feedback come back like, we had a massive customer that I was in buying talks with. This was about a year ago, and they said, "Listen, we want to bring you in, and your brand looks like it's a great product. Branding is awesome, but like we got to take that little guy off the front of your bottle, right? Like little Danny, you can kind of see him right there, little redneck dude walking away. Not a redneck at all, but that was the perception, right? It was Pacific Northwest, kind of consumer shopper, whatever. They're like, I just don't know that that's going to resonate with them. And I'm like, well, if that's the case, then I don't think we should do business together because that's not what we're going to do to accommodate this account. We'll just build elsewhere and you'll be left behind. But yeah, I mean, the knee-jerk reaction or for a sales guy is to go back to the team and say, listen, I've got this huge opportunity. We should change everything about what we're doing because this opportunity is massive. It's the biggest one we've ever had. But I took that time to really kind of look inside and say, if this customer doesn't like us for who we are, then we shouldn't, be doing business with them.
Couldn't agree more. You can't say yes and bend your knee down to everybody. It doesn't work that way in business. So, well, all right. This was an awesome chat. It was great to get to know you, Tyler, and you're a good dude. I'm looking forward to your interview with me here at some point in the future. All right. Well, this is episode 36 of the Month End Podcast. Before we go, where can people find Danos and what should they buy?
Everywhere. If you haven't tried Danos because you don't know till you Dano, you got to go find that original green cap. And you can find it at all your Walmart stores, Kroger, Albertsons, Sam's Club's got the OG in the 20-ounce bottles. So, I mean, just look around. And if you want to just try Danos and you don't want to go in big with a big bottle, you can go to your local Dollar General store and get a $1 pouch of Danos original seasoning to try us out. And then you can go to the Walmart when you get hooked.
Awesome. Thanks for your time, Tyler. Really appreciated it. And congrats on everything so far.
Fantastic to be with you today, Brad.